At 21:31 local time, a Ukrainian drone the size of a compact car lifts off a rural highway outside Chernihiv and screams into the sky. Across northern Ukraine, dozens more are launching from roads, dirt strips, and frozen fields at the same time. Unknown to the Russian air defense network, tracking every one of them, the majority of these drones are not carrying warheads. They are carrying something different. And the drones that are armed are racing toward Russia's biggest oil export hub in the Baltic Sea. The swarm crosses into Russian airspace within minutes. Nebo-SVU radars, Russia's early warning network VHF band systems that use radio waves the length of a school bus long enough to bounce off small targets, that shorter wavelengths miss entirely light up across Bryansk and Smolensk Oblast, with dozens of returns from the Chernihiv axis. Some of those returns are big, the kind that makes every buck crew in the sector sit up straight. Others flicker in and out of the clutter like static on a bad television. 30-plus tracks in the opening, 10 minutes more showing up every 30 seconds, and nobody on the Russian side can tell which ones matter. The biggest return gets shot first. That is what you do when your scope looks like a Christmas tree and you have to pick something to shoot. Even if half of those large returns are real cruise missiles, the entire Bryansk sector is about to have a catastrophic morning. Missiles scream off the rails across the sector. 6 batteries firing almost simultaneously. The first warhead shreds a drone doing 80 knots at 300 feet. $1 million interceptor destroying a piece of foam. On 6 more scopes, 6 more crews are watching the same result. What just fired? The Buk M2, Russia's medium-range surface-to-air workhorse built to swat cruise missiles and aircraft at ranges up to 50 kilometers. The 9 M317 missile it carries weighs 715 kilograms, screams past Mach 3, and costs roughly $1 million per shot. Tonight, those $1 million shots are tracking targets worth $45,000, and it only worked because of one thing. If you look here at the wreckage of the drone that Buk just shredded, there is a small sphere mounted on the nose, a corner reflector called a Luneburg lens. A Luneburg lens is basically a ball of layered plastic and glass that bounces radar waves straight back where they came from, and it makes whatever it is sitting on look enormous on a radar screen. That FP-1 drone, Ukraine's cheap mass-produced strike drone, foam and fiberglass costs about $55,000, rolls off the production line at roughly 100 per day, has a natural radar signature of about 0.01 square meters, about the size of a pigeon. Slap a Luneburg lens on the nose, and it jumps between 1 and 5 square meters, which looks exactly like a cruise missile on the scope. The radar equivalent of a Pomeranian wearing a wolf costume on Halloween. 8 of the 12 large returns the Buk just engaged were decoys. Russia burned $8 million in interceptors, chasing $440,000 worth of foam and insulation. Somewhere in Kyiv, someone with a spreadsheet is grinning the way your wife grins when she finds a 90% off clearance rack, except the savings are measured in Russian interceptors. The Russian air defense commander at the Sector Operations Center is doing math he does not like. His Buk batteries carry 4 ready missiles per launcher, 3 launchers, 12 missiles total. 8 gone in the first 10 minutes chasing what turned out to be foam. 4 left. 30-plus contacts still on the scope, more crossing the border every minute. He can order a ceasefire and save the remaining missiles for whatever comes next, or keep shooting and risk having empty rails when the real threat arrives. He keeps shooting. That is exactly what the Ukrainians are counting on. The doctrine that says, engage the biggest threat first, is burning through his magazine faster than his resupply trucks can drive. While every buck in the sector is chasing Halloween costumes, a dozen shadows slip through at 200 feet, too small on radar to bother with, while the big scary returns are still on the scope. They clear the border zone and push north into 950 kilometers of hostile Russian airspace. 950 kilometers at 150 kilometers per hour. 6 hours and 20 minutes of flight time on a fuel load that gives them roughly 7 hours. 40 minutes of margin, and that is before headwinds, course corrections, or anything that forces a single extra kilometer. What just slipped through The AN-196 Lutiy, Ukraine's long-range one-way attack drone built by Ukroboronprom, fiberglass airframe, rear-mounted gasoline engine, pushing it to 150 kilometers per hour, carrying a 50 to 75 kilogram warhead depending on how far it needs to fly. Range 1,000 kilometers roughly New York to Detroit. Cost about $200,000, or what the Buck batteries just spent on a single decoy. A dozen of them are now headed for Russia's most valuable oil port, with no pilot, no escort, and no way home. Two Su-35S fighters scramble from a base in western Russia to drop into the swarm inside 4 minutes. The Irbis-E radar tracks fighter-sized targets at 350 plus kilometers, but against a Lutiy at 200 feet, the screen is a wall of ground clutter. Every tree barn and frozen field producing returns that look exactly like the drone. He switches to IRST infrared search and track, which hunts by heat instead of radar. The Lutiy's gasoline engine runs at 400 to 500 degrees Celsius exhaust, and the IRST picks that up. So does every farmhouse, chimney, vehicle, engine, and heated building in a 10-kilometer swath below. Listening for one person breathing in a dark house where every room has a space heater, running from a jet doing 600 miles per hour. He descends to visual range and opens up with the GS-31 cannon 30mm rounds at something he is about 60% sure is not a barn. To avoid overshooting a drone doing 150 kilometers per hour, he slows to nearly 300, dangerously close to the Su-35's low altitude limits at night. Russia accidentally shot down one of its own Su-30SMs over Crimea, doing exactly this kind of intercept. In October 2025, friendly fire. In the chaos, he fires a burst and misses. The Lutiy keeps flying because it has no idea it is being shot at. He pulls up 4G, shoving him into the seat, burns through a turn, and comes back for a second pass. Same problem. The drone is below him now, hugging terrain at 200 feet, and he has to dive toward the ground in the dark to get a firing angle. The IRST paints the exhaust, but the targeting computer will not hold a stable solution. The closure rate is all wrong. The jet is vibrating at low speed, and the target keeps merging with ground heat below. He fires another burst. Tracers arc past the drone's left wing and chew into a frozen field. He pulls off 15 minutes of fuel burned, chasing a target that costs less than his ejection seat, and every pass puts an $85 million fighter at the edge of its flight envelope in the dark, like trying to swat a mosquito with a Cadillac, except the mosquito does not even know you are in the room. The drone has no idea it survived. No radar warning receiver, no missile warning system, no clue what is happening around it. A fiberglass tube with a GPS, a camera, and a warhead flying deaf through a flight it cannot hear. Against a supersonic fighter, that cluelessness is the best defense system on the airframe. The jet cannot slow down enough to shoot something that does not know it should be scared. The surviving Lutiys push north, and 20 minutes past the border, the GPS signal goes silent. If you look here at what just shut it down, that is a Pol-21, a Russian ground-based jammer that drowns out satellite navigation the way a foghorn drowns out a whisper. It broadcasts noise across every GPS and GLONASS frequency simultaneously, and the drone's receiver cannot hear the real satellites through the static. The computer gives up on satellites and starts flying by dead reckoning. Gyroscopes for direction, and a downward-facing camera checking the ground against a stored library of what the terrain is supposed to look like. In the basement outside Chernihiv, the operator watches GPS indicators go red, one after another. She pushes an updated waypoint through the satellite data link. Nothing. Backup channel. Nothing. The Pol-21 is drowning every frequency she has. The drones are on their own now, navigating on gyroscopes and a camera, and she can do exactly nothing except watch the telemetry lag further behind reality. Without GPS to keep it honest, the gyroscope drifts. Errors stack up like compound interest, small at first, then growing. After 90 minutes of flying blind through the Smolensk-Pskov corridor, the Lutiyis have wandered roughly 800 meters west of where they are supposed to be. That is nothing over open countryside. It will be everything at the target. 6 hours of droning through hostile darkness on a gasoline engine and a prayer, The occasional smear of city lights off the left wing, the glow of a military airfield where Pantsir batteries sit on alert. The Lutiy passes between the two of them, too low and too small to register, threading the gap like a mouse between sleeping cats. No pilot, no operator, just a gyroscope, a camera, and a set of coordinates programmed into its brain before it left the runway. Then the GPS comes back. Clean signal, full constellation position, updating 10 times a second. The computer accepts the fix and banks west. Except the GPS is lying. The drone starts drifting towards Estonia. If you look here at what just happened inside the navigation computer, it accepted a counterfeit satellite signal, a fake so good the receiver cannot tell the difference. This is GNSS spoofing, and it is a completely different animal from jamming. Jamming blocks the signal. The drone knows GPS is gone and switches to backup. Spoofing feeds the drone a perfect forgery that says you are right here when you are actually 15 kilometers east. You follow the directions with total confidence, arrive at the wrong address, and never know the map was a lie. During this campaign, the spoofing shoved drones sideways into NATO airspace. A Lutiy slammed into an Estonian power plant. 2 more crashed in Finland. Others came down in Latvia and Lithuania. If the terrain camera fails or the terrain is too featureless to match, the drone trusts the fake GPS and flies wherever Russia points it. Every one of those drones trusted that counterfeit signal and flew precisely where Russia told them to. But this Lutiy's camera catches the lie. The ground below does not match. The computer sees a river bend at coordinates that contradict the GPS fix, recognizes the mismatch against its stored terrain library, and overrules the satellite entirely. Banks back onto the original track as if the spoof signal never happened. Like having a friend in the passenger seat who looks out the window and says, "I do not care what the GPS says." I recognize this intersection. Turn left. As long as the camera can see landmarks, a lying GPS is irrelevant. The problem comes when every field is under March snow and the library has nothing to compare against. The spoofing system, defeated by an off-the-shelf camera module that costs less than a decent anniversary dinner. The spoofing is beaten, but the 800-meter drift from the GPS blackout is still there baked in before the spoofing even started. Close to on track, but 800 meters off. Jamming, spoofing, and a supersonic fighter, and the drones are still flying. What is waiting at Ust-Luga will not be so forgiving. The surviving Lutiys, 8 to 10 from the original package, cross into Leningrad Oblast at 348 at 200 feet. The camera locks the Luga River ahead, a strong feature cutting through flat coastal lowland, and the drones drop to 100 feet to follow the river northwest toward the port. The drones are descending over a port that has already been hit multiple times. 5 strikes since March 22nd have left 2 berths closed, 3 tankers at anchor and repair crews, still welding ruptured feed lines under floodlights. Inside the Air Defense Command Post, the duty officer has watched this approach for 16 consecutive days. Same direction every time. Drones from the southeast dropping into the Luga River lowlands below the S-400's radar horizon, running treetop altitude into the tank farm. The S-400 is built to find cruise missiles at 400 meters of security camera designed to spot cars on the highway. It does not find a skateboard rolling through the parking lot. The Pantsir batteries at the port, Russia's short-range goalkeeper layer, have engaged on every attack, and the drones keep punching through because by the time the radar picks them up at river level, there are maybe 3 seconds to shoot. He spent the last week repositioning assets to fix that problem. Tonight, the drones think they know this approach. The lead Lutiy rounds a river bend 18 kilometers from the tank farm. It's infrared seeker warming for acquisition. A radar emission hits it from inside the valley, not from the hilltops where air defense batteries are supposed to sit. A 9 M317MA missile screams off a rail at Mach 4. The drone does not deviate. No warning receiver, no evasion capability. Fiberglass at 500 kilometers per hour against a missile doing 20 times its speed. Direct hit, the autoloader cycles. Second missile finds a second Lutiy of 400 meters back. 2 drones gone in 4 seconds. If you look here at what just fired from the valley floor, that is a Buk M3, Russia's newest medium-range air defense system, and it is not where a Buk is supposed to be. Normally, you put these batteries on a hilltop so the radar can see as far as possible. This commander put his inside the river valley in the terrain the drones use cover for, along the exact corridor they have flown 5 times in 16 days. The 9 M317MA has a minimum engagement altitude of 15 meters and a range of 70 kilometers. But inside the valley, the range shrinks to under 10 kilometers, and the missile gets there in seconds. The radar already knows which direction the drones are coming from. A speed trap on one road every driver uses to dodge the highway. The kind of trap your wife sets when she asks, "What time did you get home last night?" She already knows the answer. But the third Lutiy is not where the book expects. That 800 meters of drift from the GPS blackout pushed its track north of the river center line, outside the box the radar was pointed at. The radar slews to reacquire, but the drone is past the window. The missile fires late. Tail, chase, bad geometry, target disappearing behind the trees. The proximity fuse detonates 40 meters behind the drone. Shrapnel tears through the mid-fuselage. If you look here at what the shrapnel actually hit, the Lutiy's warhead sits in the nose, the engine sits in the tail, and between them is nothing but fuel tank and fiberglass skin. The fragments punched through the fuselage wall and ruptured the fuel bladder, gasoline leaking from 3 holes in the belly streaming into the slipstream. The left control surface is shredded, the drone crabbing sideways, fighting to hold, heading with what is left on the right side, but the engine is untouched and the warhead is intact. The navigation computer has no way to feel pain, check its fuel level, or notice that it is even flying crooked. It flies until it cannot. Russia's own Pol-21 jammer, the system that created the drift 4 hours ago, just accidentally saved a $200,000 drone from a $1.2 million missile. Sometimes the best countermeasure is dumb luck and bad math. 15 kilometers out, the survivors climb from the valley. The camera needs a clear sight line for target lock, and the trees block it. They pop above the canopy at 150 feet. Tracer fire arcs up from 3 directions. Behind a sandbag cordon on the port's eastern perimeter, a Russian gunner has been sitting in the cold for 4 hours, waiting for exactly this moment. The drone appears on his thermal scope as a bright white dot moving left to right across a green-black field, engine heat glowing against the frozen sky. He leads the target 2 body lengths ahead, the same instinct you would use leading a duck with a shotgun, and squeezes the trigger. The cord hammers against its shoulder, and tracer rounds climb into the dark. If you look here at the OSINT footage from this attack, those arcs of light in the pre-dawn sky are 12.7 millimeter tracer rounds from positions across the port perimeter. DSK and cord, heavy machine guns, truck-mounted, sandbagged with thermal scopes that pick up a warm engine against cold ground, the way a lit cigarette stands out in a parking lot at midnight. Against a fighter jet, this hardware is decoration. Against a Lutiy at 150 feet, fiberglass, zero armor, locked into its dive, concentrated 12.7 millimeter fire is devastating. The cord fires 750 rounds per minute, and 1 round through the engine fuel line or control surface ends the mission. Your grandfather's anti-aircraft guns doing a job that billion-dollar defense systems could not. 80 years old, and against a target that cannot dodge, it works just fine. One Lutiy takes a hit to a control surface and spirals into a field 3 kilometers short. Another absorbs rounds through the fuselage but keeps flying. Engine intact, warhead intact, seeker locked onto the thermal bloom of 50,000 cubic meter oil storage tanks. A radar locks a Lutiy at 6 kilometers. A missile smaller than anything in Russia's standard inventory screams off a rail on the port perimeter. Direct hit fiberglass confetti. If you look here at what just fired, that is a Pantsir-SMD. And this is not the standard Pantsir. The original carries 12 missiles, and against a swarm of 20 drones, it runs dry after 12 shots and the rest fly through. That has been the core problem with missile defense against cheap drones since this war started. The SMD variant fixes it. 48-9 M317M missiles, each one smaller and cheaper than the standard interceptor, purpose-built to swat a $55,000 drone without burning $1 million missile to do it. Every radar and sensor around the port feeds into one network. So when one scope sees a drone, every gun in the defense knows where it is. 4 drones made it past the machine guns. The Pantsir got one. 3 are diving. At 12 kilometers, the Lutiy's infrared seeker powers up, a heat-seeking version of your phone's camera that locks onto the brightest thing in the frame. The tank farm appears as a cluster of warm spots against frozen ground. 50,000 cubic meters of crude oil and even ambient temperature glows against frozen marsh landscape. The seeker does not pick a specific tank. It locks the warmest cluster and commits. No course changes, no second thoughts, just a warhead on a one-way trip. At 0402, the first warhead, 50 kilograms of high explosive, the lighter warhead traded for range on a 1,000-kilometer mission, punches through the steel shell of a Transneft Baltica storage tank. Crude does not explode, it ignites, and a column of black smoke begins climbing over Luga Bay. 8 seconds later, the second drone hits a tank 200 meters south. Then, the shrapnel-scarred one arrives. The drone leaking fuel from 3 holes, crabbing sideways on a shredded control surface, navigation computer oblivious to the fact that it is barely flying, and slams into a loading berth at the waterline. The petroleum pipeline ruptures, fire runs down the berth and into the water. If you enjoyed this video, then watch this other video on the war in Ukraine. Bye for now.